my friends, Simon Miller here, and I have decided I am the man to solve wrestling's greatest mysteries. Because back in February 2016, when Vince and Stephanie McMahon were having a big love-a-thon in the middle of a ring, all of a sudden, here comes the money hit, and everybody lost their minds. Now, I was one of these people because one, I was cooking eggs and I dropped them all over the floor, but also two, I kid you not, on a podcast a couple of weeks before this, I had joked, ha ha ha, I bet Shane McMahon is gonna come back. Now listen, I didn't mean that at all, I was just being a dick, but you bet your ass I rode that train for a while. I don't even think there was a hint of this at the time because the rumor had always been that Vince had fallen out with Shane, mostly because Shane wanted a bigger slice of the company pie and soon realized, wait a minute, I don't think I'm going to get it. The two had definitely butted heads too because McMahon Jr. had pitched all of his ideas, one of which was that ECW, the WWE version, should be an online internet show only, and two, that Vince should buy the UFC. But maybe he was actually ahead of his time. So I would imagine being told no all the time made him go, man, I can't be bothered with this anymore, which is why he did go and do his own thing, when from nowhere, flubbed me sideways, the dude came back. It moved Shane to tears. He was so taken aback by how loud this reaction was. It kind of got funny because his first feud was going to be with The Undertaker. I mean, of course it was. So this goes to show having your daddy in charge is always going to help out, which sounds terrible out of context, when all of a sudden, we started to add some stipulations in, to which today, we still don't understand the ramifications of. So picture the scene, father and son are getting mad at each other, as is Stephanie McMahon, because she is like, why are you back, Shane? You're not allowed a piece of this pie, because if anyone's getting anything, it's me. Where's my cheese? Now, it did work in the sense Shane-O got what he asked for, control of Monday Night Raw, if he could defeat The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania 32. I would have just given up right there. He wasn't going to have it totally his own way, though, because if Vince McMahon was right and the Phenom beat him, Shane McMahon would have to give him back a lockbox that contained a deep, dark secret. Even at the time, I was like, well, where did that come from? Now, today that has a whole new meaning, but Shane did agree to this, that indeed, if he was defeated, he would return this to his dad, and they shall never speak of it again. That last bit, well, you should take that literally. And as you'd expect too, it led to rampant speculation as to what the flub was in this thing. I mean, was it Shane's stake in the company? Was it the truth about who the real higher power was? Was it the secrets about whether or not Vince McMahon wore a wig? Was it who threw the pie into Kevin Owens' face? We all wanted to know. Now, yes, to be fair, Millie McMahon did lose that match at Mania 32, so per the storyline, there was no need to actually reveal this. But given that WWE is a weekly episodic TV series, that, my friend, is ridiculous. As is this. Because any good writer will tell you, if you do have a humdinger of a twist like that, you can't then piss off your audience by not telling them what it is, because by that logic, you can just come up with whatever you want and then go, man, don't worry about it. It also means eventually your fans will have zero investment in your product, because they'll know not to get emotionally tied to anything, because again, they ain't getting anything back. Furthermore, on that Raw after WrestleMania, Vince still went, shrug emoji, sure Shane, you can be the new general manager of Raw. So we'd ignored one stipulation, but the one that had so much more intrigue, well, here we are in 2024, and we still have no flipping clue. So that actually bit WWE in the ass more, because logically, you would have figured both of these out, but again, we just didn't. Now, there is a potential huge reason as to why WWE never did this. As always, we head to the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Now, it was all just hearsay as always, but Dave Meltzer said, well, the only reason the lockbox was ever introduced is because on live television, Vince McMahon forgot what he was going to say, and a little bit of a panic just went, oh yeah, I want that lockbox back. And the whole thing fell down the tubes. This, of course, meant that the whole company had to figure out what to do later. And I suppose they did do that, and the answer was nothing. Now, doing this, especially in the world of professional wrestling, is the biggest faux pas, because you should never introduce anything to a narrative unless you know what the ending is. I mean, it's like the Black Scorpion, that still annoys people. Can even tie into the higher power too that we've already talked about. Do you want to know why that was Vince McMahon? It's because they hadn't figured out who it was going to be, so when it got to the night in question, Vince just went, I'll be it. So it meant when the chairman of the board did have possession of this again, he put it in a safe, never to be talked of again. So we need to get in that damn safe. I mean, the problem is just that is so lame. Like, it's so pathetic and it's so uncreative. I mean, at worst, just come up with something, even if it's redonkulous. You just had people groaning here, and you never want anyone doing guesswork. I mean, just go, oh my gosh, it's a dead body. I mean, that would have been so stupid, but it's better than this. There's also a big question mark over Vince's head, and it ties into a big question that was leveled at him for years. Sure, he doesn't have to answer to anybody, but he, of all people, should know if we're going to try and create something here with depth, you don't just throw it out on live television. I mean, by that point, why don't you just pull down your pants? You get attention that way too, but it's not worth it. I mean, if he forgets his lines too, why couldn't he have just gone, I'm Vince McMahon, damn it? I mean, he said that for about 20 years. So in terms of an unsolved mystery, yep, you are never going to get the answer to this one, because first and foremost, it was almost 10 years ago, which is absolutely terrifying, and now Vince McMahon isn't controlling creative anymore. And Triple H is going to wake up one day and go, oh, I know what I want to do, so we have to file this one under absolute gooberish. Till the day we die, we are never gonna know. The good news, however, is that because there has been a power shift, hopefully we will never have to go through this again, and we will get to the endings of our tales. Listen, I'm a massive nerd, I'm a massive geek. This stuff keeps me up at night sometimes. I mean, why do you think I'm dressed like this? Is this the way a normal human being behaves? No, I'm totally unhinged because of wrestling unsolved mysteries. Hello, it's me, I'm back. I forgot to talk about something, hence why I've changed. I'm no longer a detective, but I suppose we are going outside of the realms of the main story. What a lot of people don't mention when we do talk about this crazy Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon stuff is that Stephanie McMahon was directly involved at the start. She was like, brother, why have you come back? You haven't been anywhere. I've been busting my ass. And by the time we got to WrestleMania 32, Steph was just like, shrug emoji. I'm now going to go off with my husband, Triple H, because he's the brand new champion, and he's taking on Roman Reigns, and he's going to lose, so I better be there. I think that's the one when they came out looking like He-Man. Although Triple H does that a lot. But it just goes to show there was no forward thinking, there was no plan here, and we kind of just took elements and we fit them in wherever we could. That's why it did end so ridiculous, and I'm repeating myself now, with Vince just going, yeah, you can be the GM of Raw, Shane-O. And if that was always going to be the culmination, well, it's amazing we did anything. It also begs the question, why the hell were Shane McMahon and The Undertaker put in the Hell in a Cell to begin with? Nobody told us that, and why did The Undertaker care? Why did The Undertaker care about Shane McMahon, about the lockbox, about the McMahon family? He should have been like, I ain't doing your bidding. Whole thing was a total farce. Right, now let's go back to my original ending. And don't forget, my friends, that Glenn Jacobs, or the character of Kane, debuted in the World Wrestling Federation in 1997, meaning he was basically active for over 20 years as a performer, and nobody can go into that company and have a 2-decade run without having to do some really stupid stuff. This is why today we shall sit down and try and unravel a brand new wrestling mystery, this one in the mid-2000s, when we decided to show off the fake Kane. How dumb does that sound? Sounds like some kind of TV cartoon show. And the real scratch of your head moment comes in the sense that the WWE had already done this 12 years prior. We all remember The Undertaker versus The Undertaker from SummerSlam, and sure, if you were a fetus or like 5 years old, this was amazing, but that's only because you were dumb and you go, oh my gosh, how are there two Undertakers? But when you revisit it now, let's just be honest, it stinks. Now, I do hold my hands up and admit that it actually worked at the time, because the mid-90s just had a different feel. But when you were trying to do it in 2006, post the Attitude Era, well, you're totally off your rocker. Like I say, though, it was 2006 and people were desperately trying to figure out what we could do with Kane. And trust me, we had done a lot, including an abortion angle. Seriously, don't even watch it, don't think about it, don't Google it. It's one of those moments that makes you hate professional wrestling. I mean, what the flub are we doing? To spill the beans right away, though, a fake version of Kane did arrive, and obviously this wasn't talked about on TV, but I will tell you, it was none other than the future Doc Gallows, or Luke Gallows. He must have been terrified when he did get this, because a year or so later, he had to play Festus. So if there's like a museum of bad gimmicks, you take Gallows and you boot him in it. We did tease this for ages, though, because there was like spooky wooky stuff, and Kane was all like, oh, something is making me feel weird. When he was having a match with Shelton Benjamin on Raw, when that's right, he got interrupted, I suppose, caused the disqualification, because he got attacked by fake Kane, which actually means Kane would have won that match. It already hurts my brain. And I suppose it was sort of cool if you really want to search for things, because it was the old version of Kane with his red suit and his long hair, but that What's the problem? You would have to have been Stevie Wonder not to have realised that this was a wig. And it wasn't a good wig either. It'd be like me doing this. Do you actually think this is my hair? Of course you don't. Although if you do, you're my new best friend. I really need to know who signed off on this, because clearly Vince McMahon hadn't seen it. Because when he was watching it on his tiny monitor, apparently he melted down and was like, that wig is terrible. But here I really don't know what to tell you either, because the whole feud was based on riddles and only went a few weeks. Obviously the match was ludicrous as well, because they were both Kane, which means they both had to do the same moves. And you watch that for 5 minutes, you're like, I could do with a little bit of variety here, but it wasn't coming, and the whole time the wig looked like it was going to fall off. And look, this one doesn't come off, so me picking a wig up the ground was better than a multi-billion-dollar company. The fake Kane from the start as well was clearly presented as the lesser of the two, so when real Kane was just beating him up, fans just kind of went mild. They were really disinterested, because they were like, well, the fake version's not going to win. Maybe I'll go buy some popcorn. We'll get to it as well, but given that the end result was Kane just ripped his clothes off and told him to go away, well, the stuff that happened in Hear No Evil, See No Evil, whatever that movie was called, was actually better. And in that, the character that Glenn Jacobs played cut somebody's penis off. Not kidding. Jacobs himself has spoken about this during a Steel City Comic Con, and he was like him and Gallows had actually gone to some length. They picked out all the props, but they had seen the wig and gone, yeah, that's going to be a massive problem. Can we make sure this gets fed up the chain? Now, they were told that all officials were aware, but clearly Vince wasn't, because again, he lost his damn mind. As he did apparently after the pay-per-view match. I'd be like, what were you expecting, bro? It was Kane versus Kane. It ain't Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero. Apparently the real bee in Vince McMahon's bonnet was the fact that it made the real Kane look bad. I was like, that's your fault. That's totally on you. You wrote the story and you pulled the green trigger on it, which is not a thing. So you should go in the corner and think about what you've done. It also meant that, yes, 24 hours after the pay-per-view, real Kane just beat Kane up. He gave him a choke slam on the steel entrance ramp where he dragged his body all the way through the arena and threw him to the outside when Kane took the mask and he stared at it like it was a sword of Damocles. I was like, bro, you're the dude that took this mask a few years prior. If it has magic powers, why didn't you keep it? So while now we have been able to add some context, that wasn't the case in the mid-2000s. And if you were watching Raw, all of this happened in about a month. You're like, what the flub is happening? Because you saw a dude arrive pretending to be Kane when he got beat up by real Kane, and real Kane said, haha, you should never return. That was enough for this imposter to go, well, you make a very good point. This is why we shouldn't moan about current stories either, by the way. At least we get some kind of resolution. As mentioned, poor fake Kane was brought back about 12 months later as Festus, some kind of deaf mute who could only be active when he heard the bell rung. So no wonder Luke Gallows was so happy to get away with all of this, especially right now. He basically gets paid a load of money to do nothing, because I imagine he thinks if they do give him more creative, he'll have to, I don't know, come to a ring with a fake spider and call it Willow. Oh, nope, wait, we already did that one too. Google it. So there you go, another mystery solved, or the thing that bothers me the most is the fact that he stripped him. And this was some kind of ceremonial death. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And from now on, don't do same character versus same character unless you planned it from the beginning. Also, don't kill it off after 4 weeks. This was really, really dumb. Somehow I got through this whole video as well without mentioning the whole May 19th stuff, which was basically just a promotional tactic to promote that movie. And yeah, you said May 19th and Kane would go crazy, and then fake Kane was here. And look at my face. Do I look happy? No, I do not. Obviously, Glenn Jacobs was then written off TV for a couple of months as he did have to go on tour for this movie. And when he came back, he just attacked Umaga. That's right. That's what he did. That's what we put in for. When it came to our time, one day I'll be on my deathbed and I think to myself, my gosh, I'm never going to get this back. At least I got this nice wig. I mean, you just knew that WWE had absolutely no plan with Kane at this point either, because after he had done the Umaga thing, from nowhere he just went, oh, hi, Undertaker, why don't we team up as the Brother to Destruction again? When he got into a thing with MVP and they had an Inferno match and Kane set him on fire, we were told, oh, ain't going to be around for a while because he suffered first or third degree burns, whichever one it was. And I was like, listen, man, MVP was a great talent. And Kane, at times was, but not really here. You shouldn't just be doing random Inferno matches That's what we did, because Kane is spooky wookie and Kane liked fire. Which actually tied to the character. He wouldn't like fire, because we were told originally that he was burned alive, and even when we found out all of this was psychological scarring, and none of it was true, Kane didn't know that, he still thought it was real, so why would he want to get near fire? I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Somebody shut this video down. Why did I just tap the microphone? Because I've gone absolutely crazy. Let's move on. I will point out soon after that he did feud with King Booker. That made me laugh a lot. King Booker is one of the most underrated characters of our generation. Thank the world for Freddie Prinze Jr., because ever since he started doing his Wrestling with Freddie podcast, he has given us some right doozies when it did come to his time in WWE, when he was one of those there writers. It also allows you to give context to things that have never made sense and are proper 2 + 2 = potato, which is why today, my friends, we are getting in our time machines. We are going back to 2008. We really need to build a better time machine. Now, if you were around at that time, you probably will recognize the name of Hade Vansen, because he was a guy that sounded like he was about to get the golden goose treatment, when from nowhere, it all got taken away. It's like me and my hair. One day you feel great, the next day you're bald. Because despite never appearing on TV when it came to the WWE main roster, at least not physically in the ring, he was actually getting ready for a feud with The Undertaker. I mean, can you imagine? It's basically a dream start for any career too, because even though the dead man is going to wreck you, who the hell cares? I mean, you're going to be featured at the tippity top of the card, so even if you fall a little bit, you could still be going around saying, by the way, I work with The Undertaker. I mean, talk about achieving your dreams after you take that first bump in wrestling training school. As far as I'm concerned, you made it to the top of the mountain. Now, to be fair, this was just meant to be a transitional feud, but meh, who cares about that? It's like when people get mad at someone that gets picked as a transitional world champion. I've never been a transitional world champion. If somebody called me up right now and said, Simon, do you want to do it? Of course I would say yes. I mean, you would piss a lot of people off because they'd be like, who the hell is this guy? Once again, he doesn't even have any hair. But I've never even had one reign, so I totally suck. And yeah, this was just building up to the fact that we were going to do the Undertaker versus Edge throughout the summer. But before that, we needed to have someone that had a little bit of credibility, face the dead man, face the Undertaker, face the Phenom. He could punch them in the face a lot, but at least then he'd have another win. So ultimately, the writers in charge of this decided to have some fun with it. So why don't we go down to FCW, the developmental territory at the time, see if anybody fits this bill, then yeah, throw them into the water and see if they can swim with the sharks. This is when writer Krista Joseph and his partner Freddie Prinze Jr. did come up with a name, because they surveyed the talent. They were like, yeah, let's go with Hade Vansen. Because they had all come together to write a story about an idea of a cult leader going against The Undertaker. And when they saw Hade, they were like, yeah, I think he could play that. He comes across as a little bit spooky wookie. This then evolved because the concept got even bigger, because we were like, well, Vansen could have a bunch of people around him who also hate The Undertaker, because Hade Vansen can reveal himself as dun dun dun, The Undertaker's child. Talk about soap opera wrestling. Now, obviously, nobody in FCW was young enough to pull that off, but that was okay. It's actually even weirder if somebody does say this, and actually there's not even an element of truth to it. So maybe this person was just obsessed, and there was a deeper level to this as well, because once again, The Undertaker was going to smash this guy, which meant you could take the tag. Oh my gosh, that was meant to be his boy, and he still murked him. I mean, the dad sacrifices their son, even though they weren't really. Sports entertainment. The way we were going to debut this too actually ties into something we were going to see more of in modern wrestling, and one of the reasons why we're talking about it today, because he wasn't just going to turn up on SmackDown. Hade Vansen was going to use his modern technology powers, and he was going to hack into the show. I suppose we were going to do this because it would be a way to show you, oh my gosh, he had powers too, and also he would come across like a bit of a nut job. This is exactly what happened too, because all of a sudden we did have these low quality grainy videos interrupting the blue brand. It was Hade Vansen going, Undertaker, I'm coming to get ya. This was because he had anger and love for the man, but also his time was now. They actually said this when John Cena was running around. I'm amazed we allowed that to happen. I also think that one of the reasons we did go after Hade as well is when we heard his original name, because he was going by Hadrian Howard, which is the most stereotypical British name somebody could come up with. And yes, Vansen was from the UK. I mean, if you're American and you don't understand, I get it. But we basically picked a landmark and went, let's turn it into a name. I suppose it worked because it did get everybody's attention, although there was a problem back in 2008. Hade Vansen was not a big dude. And in case you don't know, at that time, the World Wrestling Federation, which was actually called WWE, was essentially the land of the giants. The promos were good enough though, and they got signed off by Michael Hayes, and they even got signed off by Vince McMahon. Because again, this was just going to be the equivalent of a squash, let's give somebody a chance. It would just be a nice program to do before the Rated R Superstar was good to go. And again, everybody had watched this vignette, and Hade Vansen was actually doing a pretty damn good job. You know the deal as well. After you watch the WWE for a while, you start feeling their beats. When we got this one video, and you could feel it in your Tootsie Toes, oh my gosh, the big debut is coming. I better tune in. Freddie even tells a story how they got to a Connecticut show and they filmed one more of these backstage, which was essentially live to tape. Once again, Hade absolutely killed it. So the confidence was rising. These are all on YouTube too, by the way. You can search and watch them right now and come up with your own opinion. It's not like they have been hidden away, mostly because, again, I think they're pretty decent. All of this was happening around December 2008 as well, which was perfect timing because it means The Undertaker could whip him before WrestleMania and then get into a program with somebody else when it all stopped. Because one man decided he did have a problem with this, and it won't be a huge surprise that it was Triple H. And during a production meeting when Vince McMahon had gone, hey, is everyone cool with what we are doing? Hunter's hand went up and said, yeah, I have a problem with it, and that is that Hade Vansen, to me, looks like my gardener. Rest in peace. Triple H also asked the question, why the hell are we going with this guy? And of course, Freddie instantly was worried, because this isn't a pay-per-view match. He's not getting in anybody's way. Why is anybody kicking up a fuss? It also was going to help all sides because The Undertaker would benefit and somebody from FCW would benefit, which probably would have given confidence for the rest of the guys and girls down there. But no. As soon as Triple H had made that gardener joke, Vince McMahon went, ha, 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 ha. And then Kevin Dunn started going, ha, 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 because he has no backbone. When Vince was like, hey, you know what? Kill it. Then it was dead. For all the experience he had built up to, Prince Jr. instantly knew this was the end of everything. And as he described it, you could feel the air being sucked out of the room. This just means it had happened before. And as always, this storyline would vanish from TV, as every single fan, including me, would ask, well, where the flub did it go? Think of all of this as well, though. It was weeks of build that had been cancelled because of 5 minutes of chat. And all because somebody had made a joke. They didn't even debate this. Somebody just made a hardy-ha, and we threw it out the window. I mean, it's a stupid thing to do anyway, but as Freddie Prinze Jr. revealed too, he was the guy that had to go and tell Hade Vansen. And can you imagine how sad he must have been? I mean, you are so close, you're this close to working with one of the all-time greats, and it gets taken away from you, all because you look like a gardener. What the hell is wrong with that to begin with? Clearly it ended all hopes for Hade as well, because he got released in January 2009, so a little over a month later, and that one just makes me want to go and, I don't know, shout out the window. I mean, it also means it actually would have been better if this opportunity had never landed in his lap, unless he was 6'2", at 230 pounds, then he probably would have been fine. So 16 years on, and this is still a crappy thing to do. And actually, when we go to the old era of WWE, something they were basically doing up to 2022. The irony being that Triple H is now in charge, and I don't think he would do this today. But just it goes to show, everybody can change. Sometimes they do. I still think it's a real thing to do, though, because you're just messing with people's careers. Ever since then, unless I am wrong, and I hope I am, I don't think we ever saw Hade Vansen back in a wrestling ring. Damn. We are going back to November 2020 today, and an episode of AEW Dynamite, because we zoomed backstage, and who was laying on the floor? It was none other than Jon Moxley. Now, as a fan, we were like, oh, I wonder who did do this terrible crime. We waited, and we waited, and we waited. Here we are in 2024, and we never found out. So I guess the answer was no one. Now, of course, this does happen in every single wrestling promotion and company ever made, but I suppose it was a bit different with AEW, because while I may be forgetting another one, this was basically one of the first times it had happened. It's a bit like a rite of passage. You have to introduce a story, and then in a few weeks' time go, I'm not going to tell you any more about it. Imagine we did this on any other TV show. Jon Moxley was our AEW World Champion, though, and about to lead All Elite Wrestling through a very difficult time. And on this night, too, he had cut a promo where he had essentially said, oh, hi, my wife, Renee Paquette, is with child right now. So he was going to become a dad. So if you didn't like him beforehand, now it's just like, oh my gosh, you're so wonderful. Jealousy is a powerful tool, though, so before this evening was at end, somebody had spied Jon walking backstage, and they beat him up, which of course was there to lead you into next week, so you could find out who done it. We've already covered this. I don't know. Now, the really cool part, or what some people predicted, is that the pose that Moxley was left in was none other than the hangman pose, which you do get in tarot cards. Now look, when it comes to AEW, you can't be walking around saying the hangman pose without taking the finger of blame and pointing at none other than one cowboy Adam Page. This was so damn cool though, because it felt like a detective novel come to life, and hey, during this period and even right now, Page had always been pushed as a tippity top guy, so yeah, given that Moxley was the world champion, you could do a feud with Adam. That would make perfect sense, and what better way to do it than by starting with a secret backstage attack. The internet went totally nuts with this too, which usually means you have done something right, when all of a sudden we got another theory, because somebody was reading the tea leaves and they decided, no wait, you can screw Hangman Adam Page. I think this was Kenta. What? Now, to be fair, during this period, the relationship with AEW and New Japan was growing, and what was Kenta carrying around at the time? It was a magical briefcase that when he did cash in, would give him a shot at the IWGP United States Championship. And who was holding that belt at this time? If you said anyone other than Jon Moxley, you have not been listening. Of course, during this time as well, we were knee-deep in the pandemic, so whatever plans we did have on paper for Moxley and Kenta, well, they would have been delayed. So now that everyone had kind of got a grip on this, why don't we just pull the trigger? I mean, Kenta coming in and winning this belt to bring it back to New Japan, especially because travel was so hard, would be a 2 + 2 = sense. Although he would have also just pinned the AEW World Champion, which raises a bunch of other questions. So there was a lot to this, but once more, regardless what was happening behind the scenes, you just know that AEW was putting more trust in New Japan and vice versa, because it was a barren world out there. They needed each other. So it did begin to shine a light on both promotions when another theory was raised. It was like, well, I can kind of see where this is all going. I believe Kenny Omega is going to be the next brand new AEW World Champion, so surely he has to tie into this too. I mean, there was a connection there, kinda, sorta, but of course if he lays Moxley out and that allows Kenneth to win, then when Kenta does fight him, title wouldn't be on the line to begin with. So there was plenty of setup until, yep, we didn't get any of this. So I can only presume, in the word of kayfabe, Jon Moxley stood up, he dusted himself off and went, well, I've had a bit of a fall there, but why do we fall, Bruce? So we can get back up again. Now look, this is a tremendous way to live your real life, but when it comes to a wrestling storyline, well, don't cut the mustard. The summarizations continued though, because of course soon after this, the Good Brothers were going to arrive at All Elite Wrestling. So then individuals were saying, well, they could have jumped Jon Moxley. I mean, they'd quite literally teamed with Kenny Omega, who has now gone on to win that World Championship. So we'll just say it was them. But the television show never told us this. That's just what we came up with. The final piece of the chat also connected to Impact Wrestling, now TNA, because of course that's where the Good Brothers were coming from, and that's where Kenny Omega was about to jump to, where he was going to have fights with the like of Sami Callihan. So this could have been what we decided to do, but once again, it's just shrug emoji. Anything we say at this stage is pure speculation. It does bring us to the point though, where every single suspect we have laid out here did have the same motive, which was to attack Jon Moxley. So maybe this was just a timing issue, and Tony Khan couldn't get it to line up properly. So maybe that's why we had the cowboy as the red herring to knock you off the scent, and then yeah, maybe like Kenta couldn't make it to the US of A, and the Good Brothers were busy that day. I don't know. It was a little bit of a shame though, especially because when Jon Moxley finally did lose this championship, it would have been a nice pat on the back for people that had been watching, a nice little reward, if all of a sudden he did go into a feud with whoever this individual was. And that has another benefit to it. He can take his eyes off the prize for a while. He needs to get his revenge. To be fair though, during this time, wrestling was so tough to watch because we didn't have any fans. So I just actually respect that any single wrestling company tried to give me something to be entertained by. As we do have this series called The Unsolved Mysteries of Sports Entertainment, well, we had to talk about this one, and as always, if you do have an idea, drop it in the comments below. I mean, maybe it was you. Maybe you attacked Jon Moxley. In case you need to be caught up as well, we then eventually got to the Revolution 2021 pay-per-view, and the main event was indeed Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley. That's when they did that exploding barbed wire deathmatch. When we got to Double or Nothing, Kenny was then defending his belt against Orange Cassidy and Pac, whereas Jon Moxley had teamed up with Eddie Kingston to lose to the Young Bucks, which is when everyone got chatting again. They were like, oh, it's going to be Eddie Kingston that attacked his friend. But I'm just going to catch you up to speed, hence why this video exists. It was not Edward. Now, given that it was just a 30-second thing on a television show, it's not as bad as some of the other ones we have talked about, but I still really would like to know. So if you are in charge of AEW and you want to confide in a bored a-hole, I'd massively appreciate it, and genuinely, I wouldn't actually tell anyone. I'd much rather have that knowledge and have your respect. Now, I suppose we do get into the nitty-gritty. This can actually tie into the fact that we were getting to the end of 2020, which means Tony Khan had her first year as a proper booker. Because don't forget, if we go back to January of that year, he had gone up to Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega and said, listen, you're all fantastic wrestlers, but I just kind of feel like, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, so now I am going to be the head chef. Now look, I'm not complaining about that at all. It was the right decision to make, because when he did do that, AEW started heading in that direction. Well, I actually thought it was fine anyway, but that's a different video for a different day. But by the time you get to November, maybe it was the first instance when he was like, oh man, I can't remember what we did. My head is all in a pickle, and it's just something that he forgot. I mean, sometimes I leave my house and lock myself out of the door because I forget my keys. So who am I to criticize anybody? You never know as well, because AEW is still such a young company, maybe they will just make a documentary one day and they'll address this. I mean, WWE has done that with some of their unsolved mysteries, and I would like to know, because, sometimes when I'm just doing some admin or doing the washing up, I do begin to ponder who did attack John Moxley backstage. And as of, March 2024, no one knows. Maybe not even the powers that be. Maybe it was like the Black Scorpion, and we never wrote down the answer on a piece of paper to begin with. June 11th, 2007 is the night when Vince McMahon walked the backstage corridors of Raw, got mad at Paul London and yelled at him, and eventually released him from the company when he got into his limousine and it exploded. Now, many people, when they do come to this story these days, are rightfully perplexed. It's like, wait a minute, they killed a character off on the Monday, and then by Wednesday, he was just back again. What the flub is going on? I mean, that is a terrible plan, all things considered, so it is an unsolved mystery. But it does have a horrible asterisk attached to it, because around the same time, we all found out about the Chris Benoit murder-suicide tragedy. It was just the worst thing ever in wrestling. And even WWE knew they couldn't keep this narrative up, so on the next show, Vince McMahon did walk to the ring, he explained the situation, and as he essentially said, never spoke about it again. The whole thing was absolutely awful, and if you never watched again, I don't blame you at all, but trying to get a positive spin out of this, there was, of course, a plan in place, so I will try and decipher that as best as I can. Now, a huge reason WWE did decide to kick this out the window is because the first skit was meant to be Vince McMahon's funeral. I mean, can you actually imagine if they had gone ahead with this? I would have been one of them. I would have quit watching too. Even in 2007, McMahon was convinced he could get people talking though, and he was absolutely right, because I found an article from CNBC that mentioned traffic to WWE.com doubled overnight, and Google searches got so out of control that if you did indeed type, is Vince McMahon really dead, you couldn't make heads and tails out of it. Then, of course, there's everything with Donald Trump. Triple H has told this story, because even he rang up WWHQ, and he's like, is everything all right with Vince? I heard something went down. Still real to him. Now, I suppose a large reason they were able to get this reaction is because, one, it was totally absurd, and two, they were deliberately pushing the essence of taste to see what they could get away with. As then director Kevin Sifley's talked about on the Steve Austin show too, he was told this very, very clearly. Kerr, you gotta make it look like we're on the news. So he felt like he could shoot it in a way where people would go nuts, and kudos to him, he got it exactly right, because even people working at the arena rang EMTs, I guess because they thought Vince McMahon had just been blown up. And if it happened today in 2024, you just get individuals with their mobile phones filming the whole thing and then uploading it to TikTok. But I digress. When it came to actually making this work practically though, the explosion was actually filmed the weekend prior, because of course you do have to go get permits for this stuff. You can't just go make a bomb. And of course it helped too, because it meant when we saw Vince McMahon get into the limousine, all we did was cut from the live feed to the recorded feed, the car did blow up, and it's all about that Hollywood magic. But fair play, in terms of the technicality, did a good job. Cowan actually also revealed that there is a continuity error here, because if you watch both shots, it was raining on one of the days, so you can see a puddle, and then poop, the puddle vanishes. There was plenty of backstage reaction to this as well, with former writer Krista Joseph filling us in, like Craig David, and he had some right trinkets. And this goes down to the fact they'd already started filming that awful, awful skit for his funeral, and at the time, Joseph was playing Big Dick Johnson on TV. So let's just do a quick side quest here. For people that go, wrestling was so more serious back in the day. No, it wasn't. We had Big Dick Johnson. He talked about the fact he'd already been recorded sobbing at the side of Vince McMahon's casket. So of course, when the Benoit news came in, all of this had to be flushed away. They also told this awful story about Vicky Guerrero unstoppably crying. I mean, honestly, I don't even have words for this, and really, I don't know how we all got through it. Talent were also allowed to go home if they wanted, and we know the rest. wish we didn't. Now, in terms of where this was going, there was a plan written down on paper, but as always, the paper wasn't worth the paper it was written on, because this was Vince McMahon. He could have woke up on any day and gone and headed in a different direction. It would be a whodunit story though, because even though McMahon burned in this vehicle, nobody ever saw his body. So I guess we would have to have hired an investigator. There would then be some sort of power struggle as people tried to take over the company, and I suppose Stephanie and Shane McMahon would be involved in that, when Vince would make his grand return and say that he faked his own death with an accomplice that very well could have been Mr. Kennedy. Now, this is so wild I can't even get my head around it, although you've seen the rumours, and if not, you can still find them on Google. But during this era, Kennedy was supposed to get a push, so I suppose this would have fit in like a glove. Now, obviously this all went bad because of backstage politics, but let's not forget this too. His name was Kennedy, and what's the middle name of Vince McMahon? If you're saying James or Edward or Steve, you're not listening, it's Kennedy. So because they did have this idea in the future, as always, WWE felt like they should have done something, which is probably why, from nowhere, Vince did have an illegitimate son. It was none other than Flubbing Hornswoggle. So basically, all of this absolutely sucked. I'd much rather it was a mystery. Now, obviously, this angle isn't talked about much these days for the obvious reasons, but I just want to double back down on that point we talked about a minute ago. It just goes to show, when it comes to the world of sports entertainment, sometimes there's bad and sometimes they're good. But mostly, I don't think we should be involving death in any kind of professional wrestling angle. I mean, there's enough sadness in the real world. Don't bring it into the stuff you're making up on the fly. At one point too, McMahon had decided this was going to be the end of his character, but I don't think he ever would have lived up to that stipulation just because, well, you know what he's like. I mean, he was still on TV in 2022. That was 15 years after he'd gone and blown himself up. There were other wrestlers that felt this way too, even before the Chris Benoit stuff has happened, because as Mick Foley talked about on his own podcast, he totally hated this, and he actually got into a war of words about it with none other than Vince McMahon. Now, this was down to the fact he'd been doing a lot of outside work with people like servicemen and kids that were dealing with death all of the time, and he didn't think, rightfully so, it was a good idea for these people to turn into an entertainment program and basically have all of this tragedy thrown back in their face. Because once again, even though you and I may be lucky enough to not have anything trigger in our brain, you can't speak for millions of people that are tuning in every week. The real thing that got Foley though is that, of course, when you are younger, you just believe what you are seeing on the screen. So if you were one of these kids and you just lost a mother, or you just lost a father or a brother or a friend, or whatever it may be, all of a sudden you also thought Vince McMahon had died. And again, just try and take yourself back to where you were a youth. That would send you absolutely crazy. And how the hell are you meant to process it? Especially when 24 hours later, he just pops back up and goes, oh, by the way, that was a story. You'd be totally perplexed. He also had actual fans come up to him and say, did Vince McMahon really die? And his only pushback to this from the boss was him saying, listen, Mick, our fans absolutely understand the difference. I'm sorry, have you been on the internet? That's not true at all. And more power to you, you can believe whatever you want. So even though there was other stuff going on, I really do think in hindsight, WWE realized this was a terrible idea, and it never should have been brought up as a concept in the first place. But of course, with the WWE Network, or in the future Netflix, or on Peacock right now, you can see this forever. And does it have an ending? No, it doesn't. But ultimately, that probably would have been even worse. Now it's time for you to get in the comments and let me know. Maybe you love this angle, I'd love to hear your take on it, but also make sure you suggest more unsolved mysteries so I, Detective Simon, can try and tell you why wrestling just stopped telling you a story, and I'll try and fill in the gaps. And I'll do a terrible job, because I'm a fool. 2016, July 4th, this is when WWE was still very much a goofy professional wrestling organization. So given that it was the American Independence Day and we had an episode of Monday Night Raw, well, somebody decided we better have a food fight. Why not? Also, hello from my weird new surroundings. I'm going to keep saying this on every video because people do get confused, which I do understand, but I'm currently touring the East Coast of America with the last match. Tickets available now. But yes, when we do go back to this fateful night, there was a big American independence party going on with a bunch of WWE superstars who, in terms of storyline, had nothing better to do. And one of these human beings was Kevin Owens. He'd actually returned to the scene of the crime after the food had been thrown, and when he went to have a snack, he had said, this would never happen on Canadian Independence Day, because he is from north of the border. When he turned around and somebody got a pie and they threw it right in his face. Now, let's not underestimate how ridiculous this was, because yes, if you do go back and watch this now, it's a first-person pie throwing, so you see it coming towards KO's skull as if he was filming it, and actually, when you take into account what wrestling is, that doesn't make any sense. That's not the point I want to discuss though, because Owens was so distraught about this and so desperate to find out who was the culprit, he even hired the fashion police to try and figure it out, but after a year of them attempting to do so and completely failing, WWE just decided to drop the story, and here we sit today, and we are none the wiser. Kind of. Because journalist extraordinaire AJ Awesome actually asked Kevin Owens about this a few years ago, and his answer about who threw the pie was none other than Vince McMahon. But I went back and listened to this interview, and I think Kevin is trying to make out like, of course it was Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon at the time was responsible for all of the stories, so no matter what happens under the WWE banner, you point your finger at Vince McMahon. Amazingly, a short while after this, the Road Dogg Jesse James on his podcast also talked about this, and he too said, yeah, it was meant to be the chairman of the board. But once again, I loaded this up in my ears, and I actually think he must have heard the story that we just talked about and presumed that was the case, because he didn't really have any information to back that up either. It was just people walking around going, oh, Vince McMahon threw the pie. Now, even if this was the idea, it was totally dropped from television, although do not forget, after this, Kevin Owens did headbutt Vince McMahon on television. It was a shoot headbutt. It's a different story for a different day. So I suppose you could start crossing the streams, but in no way do I think anybody sat down and pitched this thing where they went, okay, so Kevin is going to get a pie in the face, and his response is going to be attempted murder of an old man. And if you were just solely watching Raw and SmackDown as well, you would have no idea about any of this, because once again, they just decided to stop talking about it one day. And let's say that it was Vince. How on earth is that ever going to figure into any kind of a narrative? I mean, what was the payoff going to be? Kevin Owens versus Vince McMahon at WrestleMania? I don't think anybody wanted to see that, and I'm Kevin Owens' biggest fan. So instead, we must take our own brains and go through some other contenders. And the first started with the vaudevillains who were trying to sing to entertain their guests when they got booed off stage, so actually, they could potentially be responsible for this, because yeah, if you were trying to perform at a party and people started going, boo, boo, we don't want you here, you'd probably think, well, screw you guys, I'm gonna throw food into your face. We've all done it. The Miz and Maurice then told people not to do a food fight, which of course is what triggered the food fight, because they were the first people to get food in their face. So once again, maybe they wanted to get food revenge. I mean, they were wearing very nice clothes, although actually there's another mystery here, because nobody ever points the finger of blame about who threw that stuff at Miz and Maurice. So it could be the same person. And if it was, it also means Miz and Maurice, innocent. We also saw the Dudleys, The Ascension, Enzo and Cass, Bo Dallas, Primo, Echo and Big Show, as well as Kane. And actually at one point it's Big Show that goes to throw some grub at Luchador. The Luchador moves out the way and he hits Kane, and then Kane and the Big Show are about to chokeslam each other when Heath Slater turns up and he decides to throw some food at Kane and the Big Show. So surprise, surprise, he gets chokeslammed through a table. Look at my face. I love goofy wrestling for life. It's my favorite thing ever, and I had to go back and watch this, and I tell you right now, it's shit. The real crazy part is then you get this insane camera cut when all of a sudden everybody is gone, apart from Kevin Owens, when yes, he turns around and he gets that stupid pie in the face. Remember when people said that 2016 wasn't a good year for WWE? Well, let me introduce you to Exhibit A. But ultimately, this whole thing was just meant to be some stupid joke, because every single year WWE felt like they needed to do this just because it was a tradition. It's like the Halloween street fights they do in October. Vince McMahon had got into this really weird pattern where essentially all his creativity was based on things that he had done 10 years ago. So I can only presume that he thought this was absolutely hysterical. Once again, look at the lack of emotion on my face. I can tell you for free, it's not. It's also an insult when you do go back through some of the individuals I just mentioned to you, because it asks an even bigger question: why weren't they in proper programs? Imagine you did turn up on a Monday or Friday and you were told, yes, we just need you to sit in catering and throw some food around. You'd probably be transported to that first time you took a bump, and you'd ponder to yourself, why did I get into this? And why have I hurt myself through all of these years just so somebody can take a carrot, stick it where the sun don't shine? Therefore, after going through all this footage numerous times, I have decided to come to my decision, and it is somebody that you see right at the start of this event. That's right, I think the person that threw the pie in Kevin Owens' face is none other than Summer Rae. She is pointing and laughing from second one, and also makes sure she stays completely out of harm's way, and by the time we are hurling all this stuff around, she is nowhere to be seen, probably because she had taken shelter under a table, just waiting for the right time to strike. I mean, why else would you do that if you didn't have a plan? It also means that we were robbed of Kevin Owens versus Summer Rae, although Summer did tease a return to WWE the other day, and Kevin Owens needs a program right now. Put your hands together, Miller's done it again. It is amazing too, because if you type this into Google at the moment, you will find dozens and dozens of threads of people talking about who was responsible for this, even though Vince McMahon has been mentioned in 2 separate interviews. I mean, in many ways, I hope we never actually find out who the answer to this is, because it would have been like when Booker T and Edge fought at WrestleMania, because they each wanted a Japanese shampoo commercial. Once again, this is totally true. I haven't made that up. I just don't think I want to live in a world where Kevin Owens had to have a match on a big pay-per-view stage because he didn't like the fact that some kind of savory product was held right into his jaw. And now I'm sad that I've had to say these things. Whose idea was this video? As I did say on a different piece of content recently though, I will double down and actually say this is why we probably should enjoy everything we are getting in 2024, because with the rise of AEW and WWE totally smashing it later, characters are being used better, titles feel more important, and stories and matches all over the place are just making you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum. And even if somebody did do this, I don't think they would just drop it and not give you an answer. I mean, you'd probably think it was totally stupid, but it would be. But again, even if I'm going to tell you the most idiotic tale, you deserve to get to the last page and read the final sentence. So, this is actually quite famous for all the wrong reasons, but still. Also, hello my friends, and welcome to Wrestling Unsolved Mysteries, and it's National Hood Week, so make sure your hood goes up. I totally made that up, don't worry about it. But back in '99, if you were watching Monday Night Raw, all of a sudden, we got these strange backstage segments that looked like they'd been filmed on a security camera. They were all black and white, and before each one, you got this voice going, it sounded like some demon was about to kill you. I suppose if you do need a modern day equivalent, it would be like the NXT Anonymous social media account that kind of gives you information, with the big difference being the ones in the Attitude Era were terrible and offensive. We got these week after week too, and here's just a small summary of what we would see. Billy Gunn checking out his own ass, Al Snow picking his nose, a lot of wrestlers going to the bathroom, and at one point Val Venis looked at Big Show's penis and was like, well, you've got a big dick. And then later on, he took something and he put it down his pants because he wanted to have a big penis too. Meat cheating on Terry Reynolds. We saw Eddie Guerrero doing something in the shower, and then he came out and confronted the Godfather's lady friends. That's such a terrible sentence, I don't want to talk about it anymore. We saw Shane McMahon and the Mean Street Posse faking injuries, and other such tomfoolery. Now it is important to note that these were originally called GDTV, until somebody decided, well, we better get rid of the D, otherwise fans are going to figure this out. That's when my hand goes up. It's like, we've already seen the D. You can't take it away from it now. You've given it to us, and we put it in our pockets. Whoever was doing these as well had some kind of budget, because there was an intro stinger to this. It actually had a logo, and of course, the big idea was that you would tune in week after week going, oh, who's behind this nonsense? And as ever, like WWF loved to do in the late 90s, we never found out. A lot of these did happen throughout the summer, so I presume we were building something into like September time. And then one day, there was just nothing. It stopped, no explanation, no answer, no reveal. Somebody in the back had just gone, well, I don't like these, so who cares if anybody's invested? Kill them dead. The absolute crazy part, though, is if you do jump 1 year forward, all of a sudden, GTV came back from nowhere, where we saw the Cat and Terry Reynolds having a conversation. Now, there was nothing controversial about this. They were just having a chat, but I remember going, oh, well, I suppose they're just going to pay it off. And after they did this one, it went back into the ether again. I mean, where is it? The Phantom Zone? I don't know. So doing this over and over again meant the whole thing was shite, and of course, almost 30 years on, we have got all the information, so we can talk about it. As you probably figured out, given the name, it was meant to be a vehicle for none other than Goldust. So it didn't make sense, because before all this, Dustin Runnels had thrown his Goldust costume into the trash can, because he was totally done with it. And his big revenge was going to be coming back as his real safe and saying, look at this Attitude Era. Isn't it just deplorable and terrible? So I am going to stand up against all this. So I suppose, given that we didn't do this, it was the precursor to Right to Censor. That was rubbish too. Now, you do have to put it in your brain that at the time, the Goldust character was so controversial that even any mention of his name and it coming back to TV totally freaked out the USA Network. They didn't want any part of it. And this is when the WWF dropped the D, because they thought they were going to trick the executives, which sums all it up. And they got a proper bad blow. Dustin went, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. And he went to WCW. Whoops. Now, I actually think if we had dropped it here and just left it, most fans would have been quite forgiven, but no. The Rise at the time, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara had decided, well, we don't need Goldust to do all of this, even though that was our end goal. We just have to pivot here. So leave it with us and we'll come up with something new. As these two were absolutely obsessed with anything that wasn't wrestling though, they did look at pop culture, and somebody at the time who was lighting up our television screens on MTV, you may remember this depending on your age, was Tom Green. So they were like, well, there is a G in GTV, maybe we can reach out to Tom and he'll come on board. Now I actually think that would have been quite the hoo-ha for the World Wrestling Federation, because again, Tom Green was smashing it, but they had one small problem. Vince McMahon wanted to see the Tom Green show, and he watched it, and the irony is, he didn't think it was funny at all. I guess he wasn't making enough potty jokes. This is where it stopped again, because of course, how can we have something unfunny on WWF TV? Well, we had a third idea, rumouredly. Why don't we give it to Headbanger Thrasher? Now this one was just whispers, it was never confirmed, but given that Glenn Ruth was about to come back from an injury, and somebody was like, well, we want to push him, when he does have a big comeback, yeah, he was pitched for this. Maybe. Now there actually is some fuel to this fire, because one of the GTV skits we did see was Thrasher's tag team partner Mosh being sort of abused by his girlfriend, or at least talked down to, so maybe Thrasher was going to go to him and says, ha, I caught this in film. And I don't know, to be honest, I don't think that's going to take you to the main event of WrestleMania. By this point though, I think everybody involved realised we have over-convoluted this pot and there's nothing we can do, so we put it to one side, leaving people even in 2024 to go, well, what the flub were they doing? And I tell you what they were doing, it was more Attitude Era silliness. Now look, I'm not saying it was all bad, but actually, when you do go through it, some of the segments we did do were borderline terrible, like when Guy and Ty were going to chop off Val Venus' penis. And there it is again. It's the second time this video I talked about Val Venus and genitalia. Would somebody please stop it? In summary then, it was a waste of all of our lives, although really it was very indicative of what Vince Russo liked to do when he had the pen in his hand. He thought all this stuff was really funny, and the more controversial you can make something, the more people would want to see it. Well, that doesn't speak to my values. In fact, when you push the line too far, I become that guy, like, you know what, I'm done. Also, you can't just start something because it sounds cool. You have to have a conclusion and you work back from there. It's like the damn Black Scorpion angle that they did with Ric Flair and Ole Anderson was pulling all the strings and Sting. But that basically ruined Sting's first ever title run just because nobody knew who the Black Scorpion was gonna be. I mean, pick anyone, just don't make it Flair. Also, when it does come to this particular idea, none of it was cool. And if you were wondering why Goldust did go, I'm gonna go to the competition, well, maybe, just maybe, it was because he was being pitched garbage like this. What was he gonna do with it too? Like, what was he gonna do? Walk up to these individuals and say, haha, meat, I caught you cheating on Terry Reynolds. And he'd be like, well, I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell her. And then Dustin would be like, well, I am gonna tell her. And Meat would have been like, well, okay. I mean, I don't have a championship match to give you. I don't have any money, because that's not the character I have. It was completely ill thought out. And really, I don't know why I'm talking about it now. We should never talk about it again. The Al Snow one is infuriating as well, because again, imagine the scenario. Oh, Al, I've caught you on tape picking your nose. Oh, please don't reveal it to the world. I already did through GTV. Well then, what am I meant to do about that? Individuals have already seen it. Oh yeah, good point. So you can see what this is. This is just writers coming up with stuff because they wanted to go ha ha and point the finger at professional wrestlers. That's all it was. We want to put you in stupid situations just in case there's some comedy. Well, I tell you, the other day, I went and watched all the GTV segments. None of them are funny. Like I've already told you, a lot of them will make you facepalm and go, I don't want to watch wrestling anymore. And that is not the idea. And now look, I facepalmed with so much strength. My hand is glued to my face. Great. Now I'm going to be on flipping GTV. But lots of people do ask this question when it comes to GTV, so now you know it was going to be Goldust TV when finally it burnt in a fire. And now let's leave it, because it's no longer an unsolved mystery. We've solved it. Just call me Simon Holmes or Sherlock. That's a much better name. So here's a question for you, my friends. Where is the most dangerous place in professional wrestling? You're probably thinking of the Hell in the Cell, or maybe you're thinking of the Elimination Chamber, or maybe you're thinking about that old blue steel cage that every single wrestler said was horrible to work in. Well, no, it's none of these. Because as we know deep down, if you are a sports entertainer and you are trying to stay safe, the one place you must stay away from is the dangerous and terrifying NXT parking lot. That's right. I mean, Wendy Chu has been attacked here, Nikita Lyons suffered the same fate as did Santos Escobar, and we had a whole story when it came to Aleister Black. He didn't know what had gone down. I mean, we even had Samoa Joe telling William Regal, why don't you have more security guards in that parking lot? Because it's a terrible place. When we had that mega episode of NXT, Carmelo Hayes was like, yo, John Cena, I know you're coming down there, but again, Don't go where the cars are. Come find me, and I shall ensure your safe passage into the building. So it's become pretty much a running joke at this point, and NXT and WWE do reference it all the time. But if we are going to trace the origins all the way back to where this did start, we do have to go to 2015. So strap yourself in and let's go. And this was the May episode of the show, or actually it was NXT TakeOver Unstoppable, and we had a great match in store because we were going to find out who the brand new #1 contender for the NXT title was, and it was Finn Balor taking on Tyler Breeze, taking on Hideo Itami, and who the hell didn't want to see that? I mean, it was the former Kenta. So people were pretty excited about this for obvious reasons, and then just as the pay-per-view premium live event, no wait, it wasn't a premium live then, just when the pay-per-view did start, who did we see laid out in the parking lot? It was Hideo Itami, dun dun dun. This was really played off as a big angle as well, especially because when we did get footage of this thing, do you know who was suspiciously close to this? It was Kevin Owens, so everybody got pretty pumped about that because they're like, wait a minute, when he comes back, are we going to do him versus Kevin Owens? That's a feud I'd like to see. And I agree with you, but I tell you, don't get your hopes up because it never happened. Because yes, here in 2024, all of this was dropped to the wayside, so screw you. And if we do go into the reality of the situation, Hideo Itami had really injured his shoulder and he was going to be out for a whole year. And some people say this injury was so bad that the former Kenta was never the same again, and they're still saying that now when he does wrestle in New Japan. I still think he's pretty good, but what I know, I couldn't even keep my own head. To be fair, when he did return after 12 months to face Shawn Maluta in the Cruiserweight Classic, you could actually see that one arm was smaller than the other, because that's how bad this wound was. And sure, that was a terrifying thing to see, but at least there was a glimmer of hope, because it's like, oh my gosh, now we can tell this story. And everyone strapped themselves in, preparing for a ride. Well, I tell you, if you're still sat in that car, you have gone absolutely nowhere. And what was even worse about this is that when Itami was starting to work and have matches again, Corey Graves on commentary even said, hey, man, I just want to talk about Kevin Owens here. I know that he was around at the time of this attack, but KO would never do anything like that. So you search your feelings in your tum-tum and you were like, yes, we are going to do this program. But once again, it was just a massive lie and a massive ruse. There was even other more suspects which would have made this a great whodunit. I mean, take somebody like Finn Balor. He was involved on that night with that match with Tyler Breeze. He beat him, he became the #1 contender, and he actually went on to become the champion. So he could have gone, it was me. I knew I had to do what I wanted to do to get ahead, so I took my opportunity and I murked him. I mean, you could have even made it Samoa Joe, who did debut on that night, because isn't that the most Samoa Joe thing to do? He turns up at NXT, he looks at the roster and says, man, I need to beat somebody up, which is when he did find Itami, and he just whacked him in the head. It would also made what he said to William Regal later on even funnier, because he's the guy that started all of this. Also, let's not pretend that two indie darlings such as Samoa Joe and Hideo Itami wouldn't have popped the NXT crowd. That audience would have totally loved it. They would have been there for it. Instead, do you know what WWE chose? Absolutely nobody. That's right. Because like a lot of these unsolved mysteries, it was just dropped cold. And do you know who that made look like an absolute goober? It was Itami. Because when he did have a microphone in his hand, you were like, well, why aren't you talking about this? Why don't you care? Somebody took 12 months of your career away, and you don't seem to be bothered at all. I mean, at the very least, surely you'd be mad at management. It'd be like me getting beaten up and going to the police, and the cops going, we don't care about this, and if you don't leave this precinct straight away, you're going to get arrested. Be like, damn it, it's happened again. Now, in terms of real life, once again, Kenta was actually really mad about this, because by the time he did leave the company, went on social media, all he did was go, man, I did not enjoy my time there, mostly because of stupid things like this. He must have kept up with the program as well, because when other people would get attacked in the parking lot, he would post like lol emojis, so let's not pretend that he did forget he was not a goldfish. Now ultimately, Kenta's overall run in WWE wasn't all that great because he did have to tone down his innovative offense, which is kind of ironic today, because if he was in Triple H's WWE on the main roster, I mean, look how everybody is working now, he would have been told, do all your crazy kicks and be a little bit more violent, and actually, if he had joined in 2024, he would have been way more successful. I do understand this and why it would piss you off, because that's like getting a promotion at work and doing all the things that you did to get there. When your boss turns around and be like, well, I don't like any of this, you'd be like, well, that's 2 + 2 = potato. I'm just taking these skills and I'm trying to paste it onto a brand new role. What the flub do you want me to do? I mean, even today, Kenta will tell anybody that listens how crap this all was. And let's not forget, his arm still isn't 100%. I mean, we talked about this earlier. It's why when people do watch his current day work, they always compare him to the old Kenta. which is totally unfair. He's not the old Kenta. Life kicked his ass. It kicks everyone's ass. And yes, sure, WWE has done this plenty of times before. It's why this series exists to begin with. But if you are a performer put in this situation and you think it's holding you back, of course you're going to feel like a negative Nancy because you want to do the best job possible. There's actually those in charge who are holding you back. And if you're a crowd member, an audience member, or a fan too, it's a little bit like they're laughing in our face. Because we all sat there and we got excited, and again, we're almost 10 years removed from that, and I still have no idea who attacked Atami in the damn NXT parking lot. Now, admittedly, there are worse things, but if you are sat here right now going, oh my gosh, maybe Kenta could come back to WWE, I would take those thoughts and flush them down the toilet. Once again, just go and check him out on Twitter. I don't think he likes them very much. I mean, that bridge just does sound like it has been burned, especially because he did go back to Japan and kind of made a whole new career for himself. But also, you have to understand, how could he trust management wouldn't do this to him again? He'd probably get attacked in the Raw parking lot by CM Punk, and it would be teased it was CM Punk, and that we were going to have a go-to-sleep battle when he would come back to TV, and CM Punk would go, no, I don't want to do that. Once again, thrown out the window. I can't go through it twice. So really, this is another one for the scrap heap, and you're best to make peace with it, because it's not going to change. The next time you do see someone attacked in that parking lot, you remember Hideo Itami and get prepared, because I bet WWE does forget to follow up on this one more time at least. I don't know why they do that. A soap opera wouldn't do that, but hey, that's what happens when you do go 52 weeks a year. Sometimes things fall through the cracks. But it is another unsolved mystery, and look, if you think there was another suspect that would have been an even better story, let me know in the comments below. And look, there's a video on the screen, which, yes, is another unsolved mystery. So if you like closure in your life, I wouldn't click it, but please click it anyway, because it's YouTube, otherwise I'm in trouble.